The video will start in a few seconds, but as a reminder, remember, if you have a question, comment, or suggestion about this video, please follow the link below. Also note that you can post anonymously. Hello again, I'm Rodney Reynolds from 3dgameman.com and welcome to another video review. Today I'm looking at the Cooler Master HAF XB case. The box itself looks fine. There's lots of pictures, features, and specifications about the product on it, as well as a couple of holes, two in either side for carrying the box. Now let me open it up and see what's inside. Two big chunks of styrofoam on either side, and the case itself is in a plastic bag. They include a user's manual and a bunch of drive rails, a speaker, screws, and lots of cable ties. At first glance, you might be thinking, wow, this thing looks like a laser printer or a small form factor case. Well, it's really neither. This is a mid-tower computer case, and you can fit a nice bit of stuff on the inside. Now, typically, when you think of a mid-tower case, you're thinking of a tower design and nothing like this. And it's cool that it is very unique. It is mainly steel, but there's lots of plastic and mesh. This case is black on the outside and black on the inside. I really like the overall styling on this case. It has a couple of handles, one on either side. They're sturdy. You'll have no problem lifting the case full of hardware with these. There's also ventilation on either side of the case. As well, plenty of mesh. At the top, you can install an optional 200mm fan, and they do have rubber washers here to prevent vibrations. Also at the front, they include mesh. Behind this, there are two 120mm fans, but you can also install an optional two 140mm fans if you prefer. Here at the front as well, there's two 5¼ drive bays. Note, the drive bay covers are also mesh. And these just pop out by pinching on either side. They go back just as easily. You can also install up to two 3.5-inch or two 2.5-inch drives here. Note the ventilation, and they're very easy to remove and install. Just flip this lever, pull it out, install the drive, and then pop it back into place. Here's the power button, reset button, and status LED, the microphone jack, headphone jack, and two USB 3 ports. I showed you earlier the handle and the ventilation on the left side of the case. Well, this is the right side of the case. And note how this top panel has a pushed up section. This is to allow for installation of the 200mm fan, and remember, that fan is optional. At the back of the case, there's extra ventilation and places to install optional fans. You can install up to 3 optional fans back here, one 120mm and two 80mm fans. They include 7 ventilated expansion slots. Here's where the motherboard's I/O shield plate gets installed, and you can also install a standard ATX power supply. Note how this area is kind of punched out. That gives you more space on the inside of the case. This comes off, and then you just mount this to the power supply, then slide it right back into the case. There are also thumb screws on all of the panels, 2 on the top panel, 2 on the right panel, and 2 on the left panel. And there are 3 holes here. You can punch these out if you want to allow for water cooling and or cables to pass through. Now, to remove this top panel, simply take off 2 thumb screws, slide it back, then lift it off. And the 2 side panels are just as easy to remove. Just take off 2 thumb screws and slide them off. As I mentioned before, there are 2 120mm fans at the front of the case, and by the way, these intake cool air. Now, these fans can be replaced with optional 140mm fans if you choose. Also note that you can fit a 240mm radiator at the front. This case fits standard ATX, micro-atx, and mini-itx form factor motherboards, and because of its design, there's lots of room to work on the inside, and the motherboard tray in this case is actually removable. I'll show you how that works in just a minute. Also on the motherboard tray, there's a large hole for the cooler's retention plate. Now, speaking of coolers, you can install a cooler that is up to 180mm in height at 7.1 inches. Also, video cards up to 334mm or 13.1 inches in length. That's impressive for a case of this shape and size. Also, with this particular case, there is plenty of places to route and organize cables. Here's how to remove the motherboard tray. Simply take off 2 thumb screws on either side and lift the motherboard tray off. Note the soft footing for the power supply. This is to cut down on scratching and also vibrations. They also have this hot swappable or X-stock design for the 2 front external 2.5-inch or 3.5-inch serial ATA drives. They include an internal 2.5-inch drive. You can fit up to 4 2.5-inch drives on this, but actually you can fit up to a total of 6 2.5-inch drives in this case, because you can fit 2 more in the front external drive bays. Also note the toolless design for the 5.25-inch drive bays. And note that this 2.5-inch drive cage can actually be removed, which is pretty cool because you might need some extra space on the inside of this case. They have thumb screws on the expansion slots, which is excellent because it will make installing and removing cards very easy. And you know what? I would rather see thumb screws here than some kind of fancy toolless design. Now, I mentioned before that you kind of need to remove that external power supply bracket on the back when installing a power supply. You know, mount the bracket to the power supply and then slide it all in. You can do that, but if your power supply is actually small enough, you should be able to slide it down from the top as long as you have nothing else in the case, including the motherboard tray. So that's another option for installing the power supply. Probably, though, the easiest thing to do is to take off those 4 thumb screws on that back power supply bracket, remove that, then mount it to the power supply and slide it all in. At the bottom of the case, there's extra ventilation as well as 4 rubber feet and a removable power supply dust filter. To recap, they include 2 120mm intake fans at the front of the case, but I would recommend installing more optional fans to make sure that you have some really good air circulation inside of the case. Now, let's have a listen to the stock fans. The overall build quality, styling, and feature list on this case is very impressive. But what I think a lot of people will not like about this case is that it's square. Keep in mind, though, this square design has its benefits. You can fit a ton of stuff in here. It doesn't take up a whole bunch of space. You can gain easy access to the inside of the case, install lots of fans in here. There's plenty of ventilation. Also, lots of drive bays. I mean, this is more of a test bench, an enthusiast kind of case than your run-of-the-mill mid-tower case. There's no question about it, but I just love it. You know, it has tons of features. It's unique. It works. It's good to see innovation in the case industry. Overall, this is a 100% kick-ass product. Until next time, take care. I hope you enjoyed this video review, and please note that pricing for this product is available on the 3D Game Man video review page.